Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly excited you're here today because we are diving deep into the source material to completely demystify your sleep physiology. If you've ever felt like getting a good night's rest is just some elusive, magical state that you can't quite pin down, trust me, you are not alone. But here is the truth. Sleep isn't magic. It's actually a highly predictable biological engine. So we're going to look at the hard data together today and build a truly cohesive, actionable playbook for you to get better rest. To make sure we've got a clear roadmap, we've broken this explainer into 4 main sections. First, we'll tackle the basic science of sleep. Then, we'll talk about mastering your sleep environment. Third, we're looking at foods, drinks, and supplements. And finally, we'll get into the truth about how to actually read your sleep trackers. All right, part 1, the science of sleep. Okay, let's dive into this. Before we try to optimize absolutely anything, we have to understand the biological engine that's actually driving our rest. Like, what exactly dictates when we feel wide awake versus when we feel totally exhausted? Well, it essentially comes down to 2 distinct forces. First, you have a chemical force called adenosine. You can think of this as your sleep hunger. Literally, from the minute you wake up, adenosine starts building up in your brain and body, creating this growing physical pressure to sleep. The second force is your circadian rhythm. This is your internal 24-hour clock, and here's the kicker. It operates entirely independently of adenosine, and it's driven primarily by light exposure. Together, these 2 distinct forces dictate your entire sleep-wake cycle. Now, once you actually close your eyes, what happens next is just fascinating. We cycle through our sleep in roughly 90-minute waves, and we alternate between 2 major phases. Deep sleep is categorized by slow, rhythmic delta waves. This is your physically restorative phase. Your blood pressure drops and intense physical repair happens here. On the other hand, REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, is your mentally restorative phase. People often call it overnight therapy. During REM, your brain is wildly active, but your voluntary muscles are actually completely paralyzed by your body to keep you from physically acting out your dreams. So keeping that adenosine, that sleep hunger we just talked about in mind, let me ask you something. Why exactly does coffee make you crash? It's a daily ritual for almost all of us, but the actual mechanics behind it are just so interesting to look at. Well, the answer lies in the numbers 5 to 6. That is the half-life of caffeine in hours. See, when you drink coffee, the caffeine acts like a rogue car stealing a parking spot in your brain's adenosine receptor slot. It doesn't actually eliminate the adenosine, it just blocks the sleepy signal from getting through. So while that caffeine is just sitting in that parking slot, the adenosine is still there, continuing to build up in the background. And when that caffeine finally wears off and pulls out of the spot, you get hit with a massive tsunami of built-up adenosine all at the exact same time. That's the crash. And because of that long 5 to 6 hour half-life, establishing a strict 10-hour caffeine cutoff before bed is absolutely crucial if you want to protect your deep sleep. Moving right along to section 2, mastering your sleep environment. Now that we know how the internal engine works, let's talk about how we can manipulate the external world to perfectly support that biology. Hands down, the most powerful external lever you have is light. Dr. Andrew Huberman lays out a really brilliant, super actionable light protocol for this. Step 1, get 2 to 10 minutes of direct morning sunlight, completely outdoors. This triggers a healthy cortisol spike and literally sets a 12 to 14-hour timer for your sleep hormone, melatonin, to release later. But listen, viewing it through a window is 50 times less effective, so you absolutely have to step outside. Step 2, get some afternoon sunset light in your eyes to signal to your brain that the day is ending. And step 3, keep your evening lights dim and placed low to the ground. Viewing bright overhead lights between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. actually triggers a specific brain region known as the disappointment nucleus. And yes, that suppresses your dopamine and literally ruins your mood for the entire next day. Beyond just light, temperature is incredibly critical. According to Dr. Eric Berg, 65 degrees Fahrenheit is the optimum room temperature for melatonin production. And here's why. In order for you to transition into that restorative deep sleep, your body's core temperature actually has to drop 1 to 2 degrees. If your room is just too warm, your body simply cannot make that temperature drop, and your melatonin and REM sleep levels will absolutely plummet. Here's something else to consider in your bedroom that you might not have thought about: invisible radiation. Dr. Berg discovered that electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, near your immediate sleeping area can completely disrupt your rest. In his own personal life, he actually found that crossed electrical wires right behind his headboard were causing heart palpitations and stopping his heart rate from dropping into that restorative state. Keeping your immediate sleeping zone totally clear of excess electronics is a really simple but remarkably powerful tweak. Okay, I found this next part so incredibly fascinating. Research from sleep scientist Dan Gartenberg shows that we can literally stimulate our brains into deeper sleep using audio. It turns out that by playing specific sound burst frequencies that naturally match the brain's delta waves, you can essentially coax the brain into producing even more of them. And these delta waves are literally a biological marker of youth, which proves we can actively optimize our environment to make our time asleep way more efficient.
All right, part 3, foods, drinks, and supplements.
So we've covered the internal engine and the external environment. Now let's look at what we're actually putting into our bodies. When we look at our chemical inputs, we really have to start with the sleep killers. Alcohol, for instance, might make you lose consciousness faster, sure, but it is merely a sedative. It is not natural sleep. It severely fragments your night and totally blocks that crucial overnight therapy we get from REM sleep. Caffeine, as we just noted, blocks adenosine, but it also reduces your physically restorative deep sleep by up to 30%. And THC, while it might speed up how fast you fall asleep, it acts a lot like alcohol by starving the brain of REM sleep, which is exactly why people often experience those super intense, bizarre, rebound dreams the minute they stop using it.
Now, when most people want to fix their poor sleep, the first thing they reach for is a bottle of melatonin. But Dr. Matt Walker provides this totally fantastic analogy for us. He says melatonin is just the starting official at the 100-meter dash. It fires the starting gun to tell your brain, hey, it's dark out, time to start the sleep race. But it does not actually participate in the race itself. This is exactly why taking massive, super physiological doses of over-the-counter melatonin rarely ever fixes sleep quality for younger, healthy adults. It really only shows significant benefits in older adults whose natural production has started to calcify.
So if we shouldn't just rely on massive melatonin pills, what should we be consuming? Well, Dr. Berg highlights 5 really incredible sleep-boosting foods. First, tart cherries, which naturally contain both melatonin and tryptophan. Then there are kiwis, which boost serotonin, a crucial precursor to your sleep hormones. Fatty fish actually increases your natural melatonin production. Kefir provides your gut microbiome with essential polyphenols, and raw sauerkraut actually increases GABA, which is a calming neurotransmitter that naturally declines as we age. Eating these foods helps biologically prepare your entire system for rest. But hey, if behavioral and nutritional interventions aren't quite getting you there, targeted supplementation can definitely assist. Research points to magnesium threonate and L-theanine as absolutely excellent compounds to help basically turn off an overactive mind by boosting those calming neurotransmitters like GABA. Apigenin, which is actually derived from chamomile, is also great for sleepiness support, though it is important to note that it acts as an estrogen inhibitor. So that's something both men and women should keep in mind depending on their specific hormonal needs.
That being said, supplements aren't magic pills. I absolutely love this quote from Andrew Huberman. It's very hard to control the mind with the mind. And we've all been there, right? Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, stressed trying to force ourselves to fall asleep, and usually it just causes way more anxiety. The trick is, if you can't sleep, don't use your mind. Use your body. Practices like slow nasal breathing or non-sleep deep rest, which is often called yoga nidra, teach you to use deliberate physical relaxation to literally hit the brakes on your nervous system.
And that brings us to our final section, part 4, the truth about sleep trackers. So many of us wake up in the morning, immediately look at our wrists or our smart rings, and let a totally arbitrary score dictate our mood for the whole day. But the absolute most critical takeaway here from the sleep doctor is that you need to focus on the delta. Look, consumer trackers are incredible tools, but they are not perfect diagnostic lab equipment. A random low score of 42 on a Tuesday doesn't really mean much on its own. What matters is the trend. We should be tracking deviations from our own personal 2-week baseline. Stressing over the absolute daily number is literally entirely counterproductive to actually getting good rest. So, which metrics actually do warrant your attention? Well, the first and honestly most important one is your wake-up consistency. Locking in your exact wake-up time 7 days a week, and yes, that includes the weekends, is the ultimate first step to anchoring your circadian rhythm. Next, look at your awakenings, specifically the ones lasting longer than 30 seconds. Track your heart rate variability, or HRV, which is a fantastic indicator of your physical recovery. And finally, keep an eye on your core body temperature to make sure it's dropping appropriately throughout the night. To make all this tracker data incredibly actionable for you, just use this simple rule of thumb. If you notice a deviation where you're having more than 3 awakenings in a single night, look directly at your behaviors from the previous evening. Usually, a highly fragmented night points straight back to late-day alcohol, caffeine consumed way too late in the afternoon, or working out too close to your bedtime. Your tracker isn't just grading you, it's actively giving you clues to adjust your daily habits.
Which brings us to the ultimate question I want to leave you with today. We've seen throughout this whole explainer that sleep is a precise biological system. So if you actually take these steps, if you perfect that biological engine with morning sunlight, if you optimize your room environment, and if you use the exact right nutritional fuel while cutting out those sleep killers, how much of your true waking potential could you reclaim tomorrow? The tools are quite literally right in front of us, ready to be implemented tonight. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and here's to a truly great night's sleep.